Thank you, first and foremost, for coming. I know we delay. We always delay because people operate on their standard time. Some people call it Eastern Standard Time. I call it Indian Standard Time. It's whatever you want it to be. So, thanks for coming. I know we actually prefer a bit of a smaller crowd because it allows more of an intimate conversation. So, before we start, it's the best part. Some of you I know from before, been around, which is great. Some people are new. Something like this is fantastic because we can have real conversations about real problems and real solutions in your neighborhood. So if you guys don't mind, if you're comfortable with it, we can go around the room. We can just introduce ourselves and really what brought us here today. So I'll start. My name is Ron Chinzer. I'm with the Toronto Police. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. My name is Ron Chinzer. Again, I'm with Toronto Police. I'm with this place here. And what brought us out today was many different things, but really, this is our 24th town hall since September. So every week we've been doing 1 to 2 in 31 of the most impacted neighborhoods when it comes down to guns, gangs, and violence. And why we're doing that is to get a better understanding of what's happening from the inside out. So this one here, it's bad weather. It's in a remote area, so the turnout it's okay with this. But the one we had last week, we had 90 community members out. The one before that, we had 70, and we kind of sit between the 50 to 70. And I'll tell you, the perspective and the insight we've learned is amazing for us. What I mean by us is, while it says Toronto Police there, we have a ton of partner groups that we go back out to, and we just give them the insight to the back. And so that's why I'm here. Sir, don't mind? If you want to introduce yourself and what brought you here today? Some snacks, we'll talk there. So thanks for doing that. And the purpose of why we do that with the smaller crowds is it gives us intimate knowledge to kind of what perspective do we want to paint today. We've been doing this collectively for 3 years in terms of just focusing on this one thing. And in policing, we've done a lot of different things, but focusing on this one thing, I could talk forever, literally, on how deep this issue is and how big it is. But I'll kind of get to this really and where this came from. We talk about gangs, all right? And initially the idea when this came down to us to say, how do we figure this out? The initial idea was, how do you get a gang member out of a gang? And this came down from one of our deputy chiefs who was really high up there. Jim Raymer is his name. And he come down to Guns and Gangs, and he spoke with myself and Jason and the other officers here, and he said, look, every year we go out and we arrest hundreds of gang members, we seize hundreds of guns, we get a whole bunch of drugs and money off of the street, but we can't catch up. All right, they're beating us, they being gangs. They are committing shootings, they're doing violent acts, they're evolving at a faster rate than we can catch up, and we're always behind them. We have to really put an end to the cycle, and how you put the end to the cycle is we have to, when we have these opportune moments of motivation and impact and influence, we need to start figuring out how do we get these guys and girls out of a gang. So that was the initial idea, and we tried. Myself, my partners, we tried for 2 years intensively to find gang members, to engage them proactively, and to have some sort of relationship to say, look, you don't have to do this anymore. We can try with you, we can try. And in the course of 3 years, we've dealt with approximately 70 gang members, both male and females, and we've only had success with one. And the one we had success with was a 12-year-old. So believe it or not, it's as young as 6, 7, 8, 9 are getting recruited into gangs in the city of Toronto, and they're accelerating at a ridiculous pace, and then they're committing more and more violent acts at a younger and younger age. And a potential reason as to why they're committing violent acts is they haven't mentally developed to a stage to understand the repercussions of what they're doing. They're kids at the end of the day. I mean, I want you to think back when you were 15 years old, all right, and look at you now. And I can look back to myself even 10 years ago and say, I was so stupid. All right, now think back to when you're 15, when I thought I figured everything out and I thought I knew everything. Thanks, Jim. And I look back now and I'm like, I'm so stupid, but now we're actually dealing with 14, 15-year-old kids who are doing ridiculous things, but there's this idea that they just understand what's going to happen 5, 10 years from now, or they really understand what the impact is if they kill somebody or pull a trigger, what that actually means to not only just themselves, but to other people, being the family members. Unfortunately, one of the guys we'd love to have here, his name is Rico King. He's not here today. He's not feeling good. But so unfortunately he can't be here, but I'll talk about Rico in his absence, because what one person did with a vision is unbelievable, and he's the epitome of that. And again, he sends his apologies, because I could tell you about him, but when he's actually here telling you yourself, it's a different story. So an issue with us when we got tasked with this, we kind of had to know what is a gang, all right? And we took a different route with this. We took a really professional and academic route. We said, rather than drawing on our own experiences of what gang members are and what they do, let's take a look at what professionals in the field are doing, are being like PhDs, people who've dedicated their life to studying gangs and gang membership all over the world. What are they saying? And how can we take that information and apply it to our collective experience as police officers, and where are the truths? And what we found was all across the board, what an actual gang is, it does this. It's three things. All right, they deal drugs, they control the territory, and they collect debt. And the reason why that's important to know is in neighborhoods all over the city of Toronto, we didn't want to overgeneralize kids. We don't want to go into an area that is predominantly known as a potential gang area and get in there and say, just because you live in this intersection, you're a gang member. We have to look at, well, what does a group of people do to make them a gang? And all across the world, academically and empirically proven, these are the three things that have to exist. That's not to say this is in stone or this is concrete. This is to say that these are the commonalities among gangs all over Canada, North America, South America, Europe, pretty much all over the big continents. These are the commonalities. And when you look at the commonalities, this isn't just the only things they do. What else do gang members do? Think of the newspaper. What's in the newspaper every day?
What gangs do?
Yeah, what else do they, what are they known to do criminally? Like, yeah. Outside of these. Intimidate, right?
I think it's instilling fear.
Yeah, fear. How do they instill fear in others?
Well, I feel like it's strength in numbers.
Sure, so they have a presence?
The bigger the gang, the bigger, fear you instill.
Yeah. Yes, sure.
Weapons?
Weapons. What type of weapons?
Gun violence.
Gun violence. Right? And the gun, what's the worst thing somebody can do with a gun? Shoot somebody, and then what happens to that person?
Well, depending on where they
Let's say worst case scenario, somebody gets shot, what happens? Die. So they do shootings. All right. One of the big topics now all over every major country is human trafficking. Gang members are involved in human trafficking and sex trafficking. They're involved in stealing your car. They're involved in breaking into your house. They're involved in intimidating kids and recruiting kids into gang violence. They're involved in intimidation like we spoke about. They're involved in pretty much every crime you could think of. A gang member at some point, or gang members in general at some point, are going to touch on it. I'm not saying one individual gang member is going to do every crime, but they're part of a global group, and that global group will participate in all these things. So when we had this realization that, okay, these three things exist, but they do lots of other things, we're like, wait a minute, man, this isn't just a gang problem. This is a crime problem. All right, that's our initial view onto it, and this is a public safety problem. This is a public health issue. And the scope of this started to grow. We said, all right, man, so we're dealing with something bigger than just a gang. We're dealing with some really poor behaviors and some really bad actions and a lot of victimization in the process. A lot of victims, including the gang members, as well as what they do to other people. So the first thing was, okay, well, what is a gang and who should we be looking at? The second part was, where do we go? So this map, is anybody familiar with it? You might be familiar with it. Have you seen this before at all or no? So this is a map of the city of Toronto. It's been broken down into 140 neighborhoods. Are you familiar with the neighborhoods? And they're broken them down. I know it's tough. This got put out a couple years ago, but only now are they rolling out this strategy. And what this map is, it's a map of the city of Toronto. The Toronto is broken into 140 different neighborhoods. These 140 neighborhoods, they're broken into these little pockets, and you can see the ones that are mustard color and orange. And the reason why they're highlighted is they're considered neighborhood improvement areas.
Did they change the name from NIAs?
They did, yeah. So they are NIAs, right? So, but the NIAs is the neighborhood improvement areas, and these neighborhood improvement areas, they're based off of a score, and that score is called an equity score. So these highlighted neighborhoods are considered low equity neighborhoods, meaning that they looked at many things, and some of the things that they looked at was, what does the household look like in terms of parents? What does the average median income of the house look like in terms of how much money does that family make? What is their access to economic opportunities and jobs? What does the collective voice feel like their impact is on the development of their community? What is their access to transportation to economic hubs? And a whole bunch of other things. But when they looked at it, they broke it down and they said, hey man, these 31 neighborhoods in the city of Toronto are low compared to everybody else. So they're not at an equal scoring. And once we saw that, we said, all right, perfect. Because the last thing we wanted to do again was go into neighborhoods just based off of conversations we had to say, okay, this is where you need to go. Because that would assume that every kid in that area was a gang member. It's not the truth. We wanted to be objective. We wanted to be strategic in how we ended up in certain areas and how we ended up here. So we saw this map, and at the same time we did that, we did a counterintelligence operation on our side where we looked at where are the gangs living, the active gangs? Where are they committing their murders? Where are they committing the shootings? Where is the drug activity happening, the gang activity? And if I were to take that map of all the gang activity and I were to take the map of this neighborhood improvement area, it's almost the exact same. That's not a chance. That's not coincidence. One of the biggest risk factors for gang involvement, and not just gangs, but crime, is social disorganization, which sometimes means that your environment has a greater factor in your behavior than you actually do. So now that we see gangs in low equity neighborhoods, I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that's this happened by chance. So that made us have a little bit of a focus to say, okay, it's not to say that gang activity doesn't happen in other areas, but these are the areas we need to be most aggressive with in terms of outreach and engagement, particularly to the community members that live here. When we did these town halls, we did not expect to have gang members come in. We're not stupid. They're not going to show up to a gang prevention town hall to say what's happening. We wanted you. We wanted community leaders. We wanted people who have influence. We wanted faith-based leaders and teachers and impact players in communities and other cities even to come in to say, hey, this is who we need. Because for us as police, there's already a massive level of distrust, and I'm okay with that. We're not going to fix that. You might like me. You might like our partners over there. Doesn't mean you like the Toronto Police. And I'm okay with that. We're fine. And I'll tell you why, all right? And it's kind of a simplified version of this is historically there's already been bad relations with certain communities and the police. That is what it is. The other part to that here is by raise of hands, who's called police because they had extra ice cream at home? No? Anybody call police because they had extra presents at home that they wanted to give away? When do people call the police? Bad things or good things? Bad things. Right? So it's cool, man. It's cool. People call police for there's a robbery, there's a dead body, there's a shooting. So there's automatically an assumption already or a connection that when I see a police car in a police uniform, oh man, something bad must be happening. That's one part of it, but there's many other reasons, right, why there's distrust. But that's one part, and we're okay with it. Now, for us to aggressively go after this and to engage gang members, who better than the community themselves? Again, our role in this is not to say we are the answer to this. I promise you right now, the Toronto Police is not the answer to this. But we are the beginning of the conversation, and we're okay with that. And the idea is to find champions here today that are going to be able to drive bigger impact and change in your own neighborhoods and wherever we're going to. And it's okay. And that's totally okay. We're going to take a back seat to that and say, okay, you do what you got to do and let us support you, as well as find collective groups to help support you in the process of it. The third part became, well, how do we find gang members, right? So we know what a gang is. They control territory, they collect that, they deal drugs. They do lots of other things, but those three got to exist. We know how we got into your neighborhood. Okay, 31 low equitable neighborhoods or neighborhood improvement areas, as well as the gang activity. All right, it's happening here. So I'll tell you my perspective, and I'm sure, Matt, you can echo these because we've worked on the streets here for a long time. And it's so sad, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. If I hear a sound of gunshots call in the area of us, Matt, in the area of Matt, where's the first place we go? Because historically, that's where the shootings have occurred, in this particular pocket. Not these residential houses here, not anywhere near the ice rink, not anywhere by the Walmart, across the street in the northwest pocket of Bergamot, right? It's that spot, unfortunately for us. So we're looking at generations of impact, right? But for us, it became, all right, we know where to go, we know what to look for. Now it became, well, how do we find a gang member, right? And I do this exercise, which I won't do here in the interest of just getting to the nitty gritty, which is a conversation. But the exercise I do is I ask the people who are here to describe to me a gang member, and it's always the same. With the exception of, this is our 24th town hall, 20 of them had the same description. Anybody want to take a guess what the description is of a gang member? All right, that's based off of 2015. The good news I should mention with this is if you're on Twitter or Instagram, if you go to my account, it's at Toronto Cop. It's simple, it's straight up, it's easy. The good news, and the reason I say that, is the city of Toronto is pumping in millions of dollars into these 31 neighborhood improvement areas. I get the email, Jason gets the email every day from the city of Toronto, and I dump out the information on there. So it's grants for public, it's grants for the community. Today I just put up one for a $6,500 scholarship for students that need help getting to post-secondary education. So that's part of the strategy to roll it out. This, I'd have to bring in somebody from the city of Toronto to explain it beyond what I explained it to. I do know the nitty gritty, but that would take a whole day, and it'd be better to have somebody who is part of this, which there are. There's tons of them out there.
So this big orange.
Yes.
That one.
Yes.
The residential area.
This, so right here, 2, 21, 22, 3, and 5, Rexdale. Right here. Right. So if we look at Rexdale, we're just for the sake of the argument, we're going to call this Jane and Finch. And then down here, we're going to call this Black Creek and Eglinton. Now, within this pocket here, roughly speaking, in 2018, 50% of the city's shootings and homicides happened right there. 1,000,000%. I'm so glad you brought that up because we've heard this ad nauseum from every town hall saying, wait a minute, man. You know, one of the best quotes, and I'll say it now, I was going to say it for later. One of the best quotes we ever heard was from a community member who was really entrenched in his community. He said, we are not underserviced, we're poorly serviced.
Exactly. And I think what the government needs to do is find the service that actually working.
1,000,000%.
So investing
Yep.
in sustainable and good programming.
That's I couldn't have said it better yourself, and that's something we're really heavy on with the City of Toronto.
Yeah.
We looked at, I'll tell you, for example, for these town halls right now, the 2019 ones and the 2020 ones. The 2019 ones, we had hosted 18 of them in 2019. I had sent out on August 7th and August 26th, I had sent out 91 emails to 91 individual service providers. And the way these were supposed to be set up is we were going to host it, we were going to say, hi everybody, we're here to support you. And then we were going to leave it to the social services for them to be up here and say, this is what we do, and this is how you can get a hold of us. So community members can have direct access and the knowledge of who's here for us. And then we were going to say, hey, these are the risk factors you should look out for. And by the way, these are the ones that can help you out. And we're going to stay out of it. We don't even need to be involved in it. If you're not comfortable with the police, here's the connection for you. Out of the 91 emails I sent, only 7 replied. Only 7. All right. Out of the 7 that replied, out of the 91 emails, 35 of them were fake. Yep. I agree 1,000,000%. And I could hear the frustration. And trust me, I could hear, we're frustrated as well. I'll tell you, last week, I got in an argument with somebody from the not-for-profit there because they wanted to be like, stop picking on us. And I'd say, listen, man, I'm not picking on you. I'm glad that you're here. Because they came with like 8 people. And I'm glad that those are the right people, right? They're embedded in the community. They know what's up. They're connected to everybody. But the reality is, just like there's bad cops, you can't ignore that this bad apple's here too. And for all of this to get better, we can't ignore any part of it. That includes bad cops. That includes bad not-for-profits. That includes selfish people. Yes, sir. One of the neighborhoods we went into the town halls, one gentleman who was an elder in the community put his hand up, and his question that he asked in the end was, how do we reduce the prices of rental space in a gym at a school? All right, so I was like, okay. And we had some power players in that room. What I mean by power players is there's a reason why there's no media here. There's a reason why we don't have senior officers. There's a reason we don't wear a suit and tie. There's a reason why we didn't bring any of that stuff here. This is not about anybody to platform themselves. This is about finding the right answers to this, all right, and building relationships. And so this gentleman adds it up, and I should say the reason I bring that up about not those people is in that particular one, we had 2 people of influence in the city there. But we specifically told them, you can come, but you're not dressing up in anything fancy, and we're never going to announce who you are. You're going to be a participant. And it was uncomfortable for us to have a conversation, but they agreed. And they showed up and they stayed quiet and they absorbed it. And as this gentleman asked in the room, how do we reduce the prices of gym space? The natural question is, okay, well, what do you need it reduced for? And he said, for the last 5 years, out of his own pocket, he's rented gym space and he's mentored over 150 kids in the neighborhood that he's in. 7 of those kids graduated university. And now he's saying, I can't afford the increased pricing in the gym space. I don't want this program to die. So there's that guy there who has been doing this for 5 years. There's no testing period. He knows what he's doing. He's well respected. Everybody knows this is the guy. He's doing it out of his own, on top of working a daytime job. That's what he does. He's great. Now on the flip side, I look at that guy and then I look at this elder in the community who's done this out of his own pocket. For me, it's to say that should have gone to this guy. 100% that should have gone to this guy. Imagine he could do this with 1,000 people. Imagine he could train other parents to say, this is how I did it. Imagine we made 10 of them. What is that net impact, right? What is the solution there for potentially one aspect of it? So that's side. Now this particular not-for-profit group took offense that I said that, and I'm okay with that. I'm not here to make everybody be happy about it. I don't care. Any of us, we don't care. We're here to figure out what the answer is. Just get this job done. So when I talk about bad cops, we're talking about a bad not-for-profit. That's not all of them are not bad. There's some amazing ones out there, and we know who they are. They are really good at what they do. And I'll tell you, the biggest indicator is when I go into a neighborhood or community and I say, well, what are the best programs? And everybody says the same one, and they know the people that are there. Those are the ones that I'm like, okay, these are the ones we got to know. We have to go find them. But if I show up and I see these not-for-profits and nobody's even mentioned them, I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, how are you embedded here for 2 years and nobody even knows who you are? Meanwhile, there's other people that everybody knows, and that's kind of the one you want to go to. So the bad cops part is to say that as much as they are crooked not-for-profits, they're also crooked cops. Right? So that was the attack back to me was, well, you don't talk about dirty cops. And I go, okay, we can talk about that, but we're not here for that. Yeah. All right, I'm not here for it. We can have a conversation. You want to find a dirty cop, just Google. You can find them everywhere. Okay, well, that has nothing to do with this. The answer is to say that, yeah, of course, listen, it is what it is. We don't like them either. Trust me, you think we want to deal with it. The reality is too, who finds the crooked cops? The good cops. We find them. We're the ones who investigate them and say, this guy or girl, get him out of here. Right? It's a weird, but we're not here to talk about that. We'll get to that later. But that's the neighborhood. So then it became this, all right? Like, how do we find a gang member? And we had this conversation, and we talked to a whole bunch of people, and I do that exercise with people, and I say, good. And I say to them, define or describe to me a gang member, and everybody says a black 15-year-old kid, and they give me the same description. But if I were to go to and find a black 15-year-old kid, first off, how many of them are there? A lot. How many of them are gang members? Like not even, probably like 0.01, like legitimately 0.01. So if I were to go there and find these black kids that they describe, not me.
We just call lost boys.
Lost people, lost kids, right? Lost
And
boys.
gangs even.
They're-
I wish they be.
And you're right,
They're lost boys.
90% of them are lost, which means 90% of them can be found. Okay, we got a pocket we can't find, and that's okay. We'll deal with them in a different way. But this pocket, we had to be objective, so we didn't want to do that. We knew that's not true. We didn't want to go in there and then overgeneralize the population. So you have those little laminated cards in front of you that we're giving you guys in when you sign in. They're called the gang risk factors. And in 2007, Public Safety Canada published these risk factors. And what they said is that PhDs in the field, the academics said, hey, all over the world, these risk factors on these cards, the more of these you could check off, the more likely a person is to become a gang member. And if you look at them, nothing has to do with your race or your sex or your background or your culture or your faith. None of that has nothing to do with it. That's academically proven. They looked at this objectively and said, hey, these things that are here, this is what makes a person a gang member. Nothing else. And when you look at them, yes, sir. No. Go on by all means. So the exercise I do with the community, they give me that description. They do. I don't. And when I say that, I go, is that the truth? And then when we break it down and we look at that and I say, okay, let's find this kid that we're going to change their life. Is that kid a gang member? What is the likelihood of us finding that? It's like slim to none. If you were to tell me a business that we have a 0.01% chance of hitting a home run, I'd say don't swing the bat. It's not. This is wrong. This is. Don't even bet on this game. So we can't do that. We can't just close our eyes and say, boom, we got it. It doesn't work that way. You got to be strategic and mindful of it. So the education campaign is important. The reason I bring that up is to say that's not the truth. You go into any other part of the city, it's a different description. You go into east end of the city where out of the 24 town halls, the 3 that were not the same were brown kids, right? Either Afghani or Pakistani or Muslim of some faith, and they were from or Indian from that part of the world, and that's their impacts. And it's to say, look, you tell me if I'm wrong. They're born here.
Yeah.
It's a Canadian problem.
Yeah.
Right? But it gets attached to, this is an immigrant problem. No, man, this is a Canadian problem. Those kids are born here. So they're ours, right? That like we're all in this together. You're bang on, right? And I think the crazy part, and it's the part that we make it really resonate with people. I know it's the part that we've seen so much is we talk and disconnected, right? Kids that don't fit in, kids that don't belong, kids that don't do anything. Listen, we all go through that. To this day, I know adults that are in their 40s and 50s that are still trying to figure out, who am I? What is my purpose here? What am I supposed to do? Right? And then they have kids, and those kids are doing the same thing the parents are doing. Right? And it's like, what's the expectation here? You know, and I think whatever anybody has input in to say, could it be this? Could it be? I think it's all of it. I 100%. I think it's all of it. There's like, yeah, that could be, and it could be this, and it could be that, and yes, sir. Sorry. Yeah, we look at this. I don't even. Yeah, even when we phrase this, right, and we have to go back to our higher ups and to other city officials to give them status reports and all this stuff, we highlight the importance of cost effectiveness to say this is going to save money, but it's not just save money. We call it investing in wealth. Yeah. All right, because if we're investing in people and they're no longer going to participate in criminal activity and they're going to pursue some economic success and get some jobs and be contributors to the tax system, we're generating more wealth and economy for the country.
Because it costs to house someone in a jail.
It does. All these things have cost, and some perspectives are we need to make this cost efficient. I understand that, but we don't look at it the lens of we're going to save money, because you have a tremendous disconnect when it comes down to different things. I'll give you an example. I don't mean to harp on this, but it's important because we talked about this today. Government is a weird thing. Okay, it is a weird thing, because wholeheartedly, I believe this. I think every government agency has good intentions. I do. I believe that to the core. Okay, I have to believe. I believe we all want to do things for the right reasons. I think we make mistakes. I think we could be better at what we want to do. I think we could always do things better and more efficient. But the problem with efficiency is you lose human connection. All right, and this is exactly what I'll tell you. And this, we were talking about this back at the station today. This is something we're going to bring up to higher levels. I'll give you this example now. So, a mother who struggles. I'll use a mother because this is the example this is a real example. So, a mother who works 4 or 5 extra jobs, 4 or 5 extra shifts over a period of 2 months to be able to buy a bicycle for her kid who's 9 or 10, so he can go out and play with his friends. We'll have bikes. And he's like, Mom, I really want a bike. So she's struggling. She manages to work this in to get this kid something, right? Kid gets a bike. Kid takes off on the bike and the bike gets stolen. They call police. Okay, now in the past, we would come and show up and we'd meet at the door and say, okay, listen, hey, you know what happened? And we do our investigation. And in the interest of efficiencies, we've now said you can call and report it over the phone, thinking that this is going to make things easier for the people. Rather than have to call 911 and wait, you're going to call up and then you can report your bike stolen and then a report will go and somebody will look into it. But here's what we're learning from these town halls is we've created a bigger disconnect, because while it might be a low priority to police, okay, low priority being a bicycle stolen, what is the value of that bike to that family? It's up to here, man. It's like a massive disconnect. So because there's a disconnect, because potentially thinking that this is going to make it easier for the public to report things and get things done quickly, we've devalued that interaction, right? To say, okay, you're no longer going to get a face-to-face interaction. You're going to get a phone number and you can do this online to make it efficient for you. But the reality is this mom doesn't have internet access and she doesn't have a computer. And she's not phone savvy enough to understand how to do this on a telephone. So it's just kind of like a give up motion. And then the same expectation, again, government, is now when there's a murder in that community and we're looking for help, there's no relationship there. There's none. So it's like, well, man, listen, I reported my bike stolen. Nobody showed up. Now there's a murder and you want something from me? Like, I don't even know you. But those small moments of a stolen bicycle are massive for relationship development, right? Massive. So for us, when I talk about we're all coming from a good place, yeah, it's great. That's efficient. It's cost effective, but does it get the job done? Does it help us do our job better? It probably doesn't, right? And I can't put a value to that. We talked about, outcomes and deliverables and measurables and all the other business stuff. But the real impact of government and community is service. Okay, government is here to serve the community. There's no question. We're here to serve the community. For service, you need to be there. You need to have a relationship, right? Yes.
You can't please everyone.
You can't.
And you can't find a reason that's going to help satisfy everyone. So what you do, you have to pick and choose your battles, per se.
Yeah, but here's why I bring that highlight up and why I think that's so important is, you're right, we can't please everybody. And I'm okay not pleasing everybody. However, if us going to physically talk to somebody about a stolen bicycle is going to increase the likelihood of the relationships for us to solve a murder, I'm okay with that, right? Like I think that's worth doing if that's the case, right? And that has to be looked into a little bit more. But what I'm telling you is that's kind of something we're seeing across the board to say, oh, well, okay, I got it, right? And that's where the implementation of the neighborhood officers come into play, because many communities have said, listen, we want police there outside of a crime scene. And we want to know somebody like Matt in the area that's around when it's not just something happening. We just want to know somebody who's embedded in that we're going to trust, and that's kind of the rollout to that. But before we get to the other question, I just want to roll through this. So the risk factors you have, they pop up at different times, all right? The family risk factor category, which is the first one, happens between the ages 0 to 6. All right, if you look at those risk factors, you look at that, it's already something there. You say, well, man, if a kid suffers this or goes through this, it's probably not good for them. But the biggest indicator for you to notice as a parent is an uncontrollable kid. So at the age of 3, it's a real uncontrollable kid. I'm talking the one who's like, no matter what, doesn't listen to anybody. That's not a sign to say this is a future gang member. It's to say, whoa, wait a minute, man. There's something happening here. All right, like we got to stop and take a look at this, and who that is. It's going to be families, and then probably most likely you don't want to call the police for that. Okay, that's not. I don't know what to do there. I don't know what I'm going to do with a 3-year-old. I can't taser him. It's a joke. I wouldn't ever taser a 3-year-old. But there might be some social services around. There might be some family counselors. There might be a behavioral specialist to say, hey, can you help this family out in figuring out what's going on here? All right, then the second one is school. So now that 3-year-old transitions out and becomes a 6-year-old in the school environment and continues that poor behavior. And that poor behavior, one of the indicators is school failure at the age of 6, which is grade 1. So grade 1 who fails, is that normal? Is that acceptable? Not tolerable, right? But unfortunately, for a lot of these lost kids, it's tolerated. Okay, it's tolerated. Yes, sir. Yeah, no, there is, and that's the integrated part of this. We see integrated gang prevention. The reason we put integrated there was because it's supposed to include everybody. That is the only way. Like our police logo is on there right now. The goal of this is to have that removed. So it's just to say this is everybody. Whatever the unification looks like is going to be there.
I've never seen property owners and business owners.
Not yet. So what I will tell you is, come April 2020, we're going to start a 3-year strategy in 12 neighborhoods in Northwest Toronto to pilot it out to do exactly what you said. Everybody, you name it, anybody who's impacted, is to have a seat at that table per neighborhood to say what's happening here and how do we all help each other, right? To focus on not blaming, right? There's no blaming game. We don't play that blame game to say you did this. It's to say this happened. What do we do now? It's always to say what do we do now? And forget about what happened in the past. That's done. It's where do we go from now? What do we do? What do we learn from this? How do we share it? And where do we move? Right? It's always moving. So 100%. You can't just pick people up and move them. It doesn't do anything. It makes things worse. Right? We were seeing that across the city. I mean, Regent Park is a very unique place compared to the rest of the city. I'll tell you why. Regent Park is, sorry? Yeah, you know what, that too, but it's I mean, Regent Park 10 years ago to what it is now, I don't even recognize the place. Like I
for why Townhouse did that. I work in urbanization.
Okay, yeah,
So
so
I'm a bit biased.
yeah, it's no, what I say is unique about it is it has to do kind of with what you said. It reminded me of something else, which is important, is where so Regent Park has been historically gang impacted for at least 50 years. Okay, let's like late 70s to early 80s is when it started to spike up there a little bit. And Regent Park, when we were there was a lot of things we learned from that community that we've yet to see in other places. And when I look at it, right, Regent Park is not the only neighborhood in Toronto that's had gangs for 40 plus years. This side of the city's had the same problem. East End's had the same problem in certain pockets. But Regent Park is different. This is what makes it different. This is the only thing I could put it to after thinking about it for a long time. And when we thought about it, is this. Best example I have is Dixon and Martin Grove, and there's one at
Royal
York, and then Finch and 27. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got. Well, here's my.
Which place is on
Sorry. Yeah, Humber College, right? So you have Rexdale, which is a big place. Okay, now let's again. How many can I find in Regent Park? Like near Regent Park? Maybe one. But if I was in Regent Park, what else do I have access to? Subway? I go on a bike. I go 1 block west. Where am I? I'm in the financial district.
Yeah.
Just a block west of me. A ton, right? And the reason I use the economic area, right? And the other part too is here. If I were to live in this area in the west end of the city, and I look out the window, I see lights. But do you see any big businesses and buildings that are stacked? Do you see like TD Canada Trust and like, Deloitte? And you don't see that here, right? But you go to Regent Park and you look up, what do you see? You see every big business. All right, so it's the heart, right? So in Regent Park, we had a mother who was talking about her 5 kids, and she was super proud, saying that none of her 5 children have ever been arrested or had a negative encounter with the police. And she said the reason being is because I was a gang member and I made sure they never did this. Okay, so she was super proud of that. And then when we come out to the west and east end of the city, we have yet to come across that type of story. And the reason I bring up that example is we preach to these kids, all of us, you can do something else with your life. But they look out the window here, what do you see? I see the same thing, right? But you go to Regent Park and you see those kids, you can do something else with your life, and they look out the window, they're like, oh, I can do something else. It's right there in front of me. It's a perspective thing, right? And I can tell you myself, and I'm sure some of the other officers, is when I've arrested in the past gang members from this side of the city, and we've asked them and we said, man, what is north of Highway 7? They have no idea. Within like a city block, right? Within like 3 kilometers this way, 3 kilometers that way, 3 kilometers south, yes. People look outside for dreams, right? You got to physically see it. Like and that's why I bring that up, is whenever we talk to kids and we're like, you could do whatever you want. You want to be an astronaut, you can be an astronaut. I don't know an astronaut. They look out the window, they're like, I've never seen anything like this. So the reality of it is, it's like so foreign, and they think of this mentality, can't be me. It's very different if I say, hey man, you got what it takes to be an astronaut. By the way, here's my friend, he's an astronaut. You guys talk for 20 minutes. It's different because they see it. The reason I bring up it's a global company, it's a high paying job, you can move up in the corporate structure, they pay for university and education. It's a coffee shop. So if that's not even present, what is the realistic expectation for the most broken kids to say you can do it? I don't understand why you don't do it. It's like exposure, right? So it's like exposure therapy. Anyways, so there's this is yes.
So can we go forward in this?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just going to finish this up, and then we'll get to more of the conversation piece. So, at the age of 3 in the family category, uncontrollable. At the age of 6 in school, they're failing. At the age of 9, 9-year-olds who push each other in school. What do we call it? A 9-year-old pushes another 9-year-old and says, "Give me your money." It's called bullying, right? You know what it's called if you're over the age of 12? It's called robbery. So it is what it is. And the reason why we bring that up is at the age of 9 is if they're practicing criminal acts. Yeah. 100%. And that's the point of knowing what to look for, right? Is to say, whoa, wait a minute, man. 3 uncontrollable, 6 failing school, 9 bullying. This is going down a path that's happened hundreds of thousands of times.
It's like what you said with the whole bike and the murder.
Yeah.
They treat it as a low priority.
Low priority.
Until it becomes a high priority and then it's too late.
And then when it becomes a high priority is this, at the individual risk factor category in there, at the age of 15, they tell you they're a gang member. They're self-admission. You just ask them, are you a gang member? Yeah.
Some are not even gang members. They just say that because for the sake of saying it.
But they identify as with it, right? They might not be legitimate to what we think, but they're saying, I am a gang member. They tell you. You can't miss it. They're going to tell you. If you look at their social media, their Instagram, their Twitter, their YouTube channel, it's all over there. You got to be, if you really look for it, you're going to find it. And then we get to 18, which is where we're at now, where the biggest indicator is now they're committing violent acts in the community. They're terrorizing community. Right? But it's usually at this point here where people go, whoa, 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 man, somebody's got to do something about this. Right? This has got too far. So the point of this is to say, hey, listen, we can't let it get to this stage here. It's too late at this point here, right? So it's like, what do we do? So our gang prevention, while it says prevention, it's not the only thing that this collective body does. What the collective group and the aim and the vision of this is this. Prevention is most effective evidence-based between the ages of 0 to 9. Okay, kids are really easily influenced at 0 to 9. They're looking for direction. They want to explore, they want to play, they want to figure themselves out. It's 0 to 9 is the best time to throw in prevention activities, all right? The other part to that too, biologically, brain and behavior is between 0 to 7, we all operate on what's called the theta wave. And that theta wave is a state of hypnosis. And what we do is we collect information to survive, so not to succeed. The benefit of that is, as much as that's being not healthily fed, being that the trauma or what you mentioned about them having to take the responsibility for the parents or observing things and realizing that when I do negative things, I get attention, which is causing a chemical reaction, being dopamine and serotonin. So if they realize that's where impulse control comes into play. So if you have a kid who does naughty things and then mom has to give him attention, he's already connecting those neurons in his brain to say, okay, this gives me what I need. So it's impulse, right? And it's fed by dopamine and serotonin. Which means that, for this part here, I would not recommend a police program, okay? Because the evidence, you need specially trained people who have an education and a passion, and most importantly, time. Time. You need time, and we can't. Unfortunately for us, 911, the police, we don't have the time to spend 6-7 hours a day with a thing, right? And these programs would need that type of intensive work. Prevention programs work 0 to 9, evidence-based. For us, it's not just prevention, all right? The other part is this. It's intervention. So we can talk about preventing kids from joining a gang, becoming violent, but what do we do about the tens of thousands of young men and women that are already in that system? They can't be ignored because what happens is when they come out, they're left to their own devices and they end up recruiting younger kids and it just continues. It doesn't die off. So as much as we talk about community prevention, a very important aspect for us is the intervention piece. So it's working with jails, corrections officers, probation and parole officers, outreach workers, employment programs, mental health advocates to get those thousands of people that are gang involved in jails, in and out, the resources that they need, as well as developing the mindset so they don't do this again. All right, that we cannot ignore that. Everybody talks about prevention, but what about everybody else that's going through it right now? We can't just ignore those. Yes, sir. Yeah, so Kenny hits on a good point, and it's the participation, right? So for example, we have a lot of organizations that have some really good science behind like meditation and mindfulness and working on yourself. And the gap we're trying to fill now is that participation gap. How do you get a gang member to say, okay, you're going to come in a room and we're going to meditate for an hour? It's difficult to do, and we got to figure that out. There's value there, but I'll tell you what we've noticed on our end is, keep this in mind, all right? The gang members we're talking about are super intense. They're up here. Okay, to start a conversation down here is,
Yeah, but we have a,
so when we're talking about the intensity level that I was saying, they're up here.
Yeah.
What we're seeing, at least the approach that we take is we match them at that intensity. All right, it's you want to come in and everybody wants to be calm and cool, and you bring them down. They're not there yet. You got to meet them, bring them down. I mean, have you found that in your experience as well? Or? Yeah, you got to meet them and be like, listen, man, this is what we're going to do. Like, we're going to do this. And then they're like, okay, because even them, they're leaders, but leaders need leaders. Right? That's how it works. That's how you learn to be a leader, is you find a leader and you go, oh, I like how they did it. I can do that. And then you do it yourself. And they're looking for, we just need to fill that gap. But that is not necessarily the police, again, because we are, we're not equipped with the education or training to be able to deal with the amount of issues that are going on. There's no way we can do that. Yes, sir. Well, we're the enemy, right? Yeah. So the way it gets pictured is, like, for example, let's say I was a gang leader. The quickest way for me to blend us together, and this is not because they're smart in their tactic, it's humans do it. Let's say we're in a room, we don't know each other, but somebody walks in the room and we all don't like that person. How easily do we bond? Yeah, enemy and my enemy is my friend, right? So really, what we found, and we've, Jason's interviewed hundreds of gang members. I've interviewed a few hundred too. And what I can tell you, in my experience, I'm sure Jay has similar, unless you got something different. But the gang leaders are very good at driving a vision. They're very good at getting a collective body to say, look, those guys in the uniforms, they're out here to ruin your life. They're here to kill you. They're going to plant stuff on you. They're going to beat you up. And your only hope right now is right here. And I got you because I was you. I know exactly what you're going through. And they were. And when they bring up the things like, I know what it's like to sleep hungry. I know what it's like to hear mom and dad fighting. I know, you got to sleep on your stomach because it hurts less. When they say things like that only they know, it's easy to do. And guess what? I can do it too. 100% I can do it because I've learned that from them. I said, oh, that's how you do it. Okay, I got it. So I can understand that aspect with it. And the other part too is the distrust between them and the police. That's always going to be, and that's okay, because there's nothing like the reality too. And we were talking to police officers this morning. What I tell police officers is this: look, man, the gangs are a sandwich. All right, the bottom portion of that bread is families. That's the bottom portion. A sandwich cannot be made without a bottom piece of bread. And that bottom piece of bread is the families. They don't just come from nowhere. The family's always going to be there. And then in between, you got all these ingredients, right? Schools, jails, whatever you need. It's all in there. And at the very top piece of bread is the police. And what I mean by that is there's nothing after us. All right, we're talking about violence. There is nothing after the police. And we need to engage them at the most violent portion. That's why we have a vest, and that's why we have a gun, and that's why we have tools. And that's our role. And I'm okay with that, to tell gang members, like, look, if you want to view us as the enemy, I can't control that. We're not here as the enemy. We're here to help. But if you're going to go out and kill people, okay, we're coming for you. Yeah. We're not going to hide that. We never hide that. I tell that to everybody, to say, this is what we're here for. But this other stuff, we don't have the training for. We've extended ourselves into that space thinking we might do it, and it hasn't really worked. So it's to pull back and say, man, this is not our, like, I don't have the social work background or the youth development. I don't know any of that stuff, man. Guys like Kenny are rare for us because he has that history, but he's like the first cop I know that has that history. I don't know any. So we have prevention, intervention, and then this is where the police come into play, which is suppression, which is enforcement. All right, and now here's where we're going to adjust things. There's a study done of a gang in Los Angeles, 300 gang members. They said that after the study was done, they realized that only 10% of the gang, or 30 members, were responsible for 100% of the criminal decision making. Only 30 out of 300 were doing the crimes. The other 270 were the people you mentioned. In and out, by proxy they were part of the gang. They just identified as the gang members, and they all left within 2 to 3 years on their own. They might have committed crimes, but they were like minor crimes, like real small stuff. And generally they were on their own. There was no influence besides them in their personal life. Either they moved, they found a girlfriend or boyfriend, they were a victim of a crime, somebody they knew died and they said, yo, I'm out of here, it's not for me. Or they went to college or university. And when they all left on their own, there was no repercussion. No other gang member came back and said, man, you can't leave. They said, actually, go get out of here, man, you got a better life. But that core 30, that core 10%, that's who we want to focus on. All right, those people are so far gone past the stage of help that they need to be in a really controlled environment, being jail, to be almost forced this help. Like Kenny was mentioning, like a penitentiary. And for us, we do these major projects every year where we arrest hundreds of people. And when we spoke to the investigators who run those major projects, I asked them, said, would you agree that on all the wiretaps that we do every year, that only 10% are responsible for almost all of the criminal decision making? They agreed. So we're looking at, okay, well, how do we motivate those other 90% if we can identify the riffraff and the wannabes? How can we bump them out of here sooner than later? And then by default, we find the 10%. And that 10% are the ones that are committing the shootings, the murders, the homicides, the drug trafficking, the human trafficking. Listen, man, we cannot make an excuse for that at this stage. If you're 16, 17 plus or 15 plus and you got a gun and you're walking around, you got to get it. You got to be held accountable and responsible for your actions, because we cannot excuse the life of somebody else because of poor you. Yeah, poor you, I get it, I'm 100% there. However, that does not supersede you taking somebody else's life. And unfortunately, we had a 15-year-old kid shot and killed last week. Okay, there's nothing anybody can tell me that would justify that. Zero. Forget, like, just, it's not okay. So for us as the police is to fall back to that and say, okay, let us do this. We're here, we're not gonna hide it. This is what we wanna do. We're gonna improve how we do things. We're gonna focus on 10% rather than 100. Identify really who are the real bad ones, not the ones that are riffraff. We don't wanna reincarcerate those guys. Those guys we wanna say, what are the needs you need right now? And, oh yeah, here's the guy, that's the person, this is the person. Don't do this again. We're gonna monitor this, make sure everything's working well for you. If we can take you from that 2 or 3 year term, you're gonna be part of the gang, you're gonna leave anyways. Can we get that down to 18 months? Can we get that down to a year? Can you move on to something bigger and better? And then by default, we find out who the 10% are. They're just non-fixable at this point based on what we know. When we talked about groups, I'll skip that. This is expanded out to 30. So this was the first year. These are all the groups we engaged, right, initially. And now it grew up to 30. We have limited interactions with them right now because we had to scale back for many other reasons. But on there, I got a video and a how-to guide that says, what can you do? So once you find those risk factors, we have 3 mapping applications. Ontario 211, Wellbeing Toronto, and Toronto Police, we have a map, and what that is if you put in your postal code, you can bring up all the social services near you. So if you say, okay, there's all these risks to my kid or somebody I care about or somebody I know, how do I find them help? You can go on there, there's 3 different maps you can look at. You just put in your postal code and you can literally click on each of the boxes. That'll show you where the help is. It'll give you their email address, their phone numbers, the description of the programs, how they operate, what they do, and then you can go and find that without anybody. And it's free, it's on there, you can take a look at it. If not, you can go on there, you can find the more of the risk factors, you can find more depth and explanation for what they are. Again, the publications are all Canadian with the exception of about 10 of them, which are the American models that we brought in that we're adjusting a little bit. And then on social media, don't worry about that stuff. But the idea of this was to find people like you. That's why we asked you for the email address. After this, when we go into like the action mode of what do we do, which is hopefully in April to September of implementing things, we're gonna be retouching base with everybody to have more in-depth conversations when we're not hustling through these town halls to identify the community leaders. So the fact that you guys came out on a horrible day, on a Thursday, is indication that the impact players we're looking for are right here. And the more we can build you up and the more we can learn from you to what's happening here and how do we fit in and how do we find another partner groups, it makes it easier. For us, our big thing is transparency and accountability, right? So number one is anybody we partner with, what we say is we are exclusively inclusive, meaning that we are open to everybody. But if in the process we find out that you're part of that group that's just here for something else, we don't need you. Like there's hundreds of people we could find that can help fill that role. And also to learn. So for the professionals in the field, like that type of stuff is so valuable and it doesn't die. We end up going out there, I put it up on social media, I bring it up to our police services board, to our chief of police. We always talk about it and say, hey, this is what's up. You know, our contact information is on those sheets. I'll give you some business cards if you want. Please get in touch with me, get in touch with any of the guys, and we'll go from there. So thank you everybody for your time, man. Very much appreciate it. And please make sure you give your email address if you don't, and I'll give you my cards there on the back if you do. So thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it very much. There's food in the back. Take it with you to go. Did you get your email address in there as well? So your name is again?